Hello, everyone. If this is your first time with us, my name is Omar Khatib. I am the co-founder and CEO of JobPixel. I'd like to welcome you to our second installment of our first ever TA Summer Series sponsored by JobPixel. If you guys tuned in last week, welcome back. But to kick off this week's event, let me start by introducing our amazing moderator. She's a force to be reckoned with in the TA and career coaching space, has known her for outstanding ability to strike up a conversation with any stranger on the street, and someone I'm glad to call a mentor and a friend for myself. Please welcome Susan Collins.
Thank you, Omar. That is such a sweet introduction. I really appreciate being here. Thank you to JobPixel, who is giving their time to this community that Kara and I are so absolutely passionate about. I'm going to do a little housekeeping. I know you're going to take a lot of notes today because there's going to be a lot of good information, but I want you to know that we're actually going to send you a deck when this is over because there was so much information that we're afraid we might not get to all of it or we might miss an important part. So something is coming with more information for you. If you'll save your questions until the end, then we will take questions the last 10, 15 minutes. And before I introduce Kara, I want to put up one quick poll so that we can kind of kick this off. The poll is, has your TA budget been growing year over year? I am absolutely fascinated to find that out. And while everyone is voting, I am going to introduce Kara Yarnot. She is the Vice President of Strategic Consulting at HireClix. HireClix is a leading recruitment advertising consulting firm. And HireClix's consulting practice provides talent acquisition, consulting, and advisory services to employers in a variety of industries, and I mean a lot of industries. Her areas of expertise include, are you ready? Recruitment strategy, technology evaluation and selection, social recruitment, talent branding, process and technology optimization, and why we're all here today, we're going to talk a lot about ROI evaluation. Her superpower, which is why you joined, is helping people get money. She's led recruitment teams for Fortune 500 companies such as SAIC, Boeing, Intel. Her past and current clients include some really big names: CVS Health, Commerce Bank, BART, like in San Francisco, BART, Banfield Pet Hospital, Dexcom, Forefront Dermatology, McKesson, Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Labs. It spans the gamut. She is a frequent speaker, so if you've been at any talent acquisition forum, you may have seen her. She holds an MBA from the University of Maryland and a bachelor's from Carnegie Mellon University. When she's not trying to help her clients innovate, then she is either helping rescue dogs, training for a half marathon, or traveling the world in search of a great bottle of wine. She has introduced me to my favorite rosé, but that's another conversation. So, Kara, before we get started, did I miss anything?
No, I think you covered more than enough of it, Susan. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. Really happy to be here. HireClix is happy to participate. We are a partner with JobPixel and really excited to be a part of the summer series.
She's a force to be reckoned with in TA. You guys are in for a treat today. So, Ryan, how are we doing? Do we have enough votes here that we can look and see how our see if people's budgets have increased?
Looks like it. Let me end the poll here and share the results for you.
Okay, so 6% have increased, 53% have increased, but they still need more money. There's a shock. Let's see, 29% have stayed the same and 12% have been reduced. So, Kara, are you surprised by that?
I'm heartened to see that 53% have at least seen it increase a little bit. Thank you to the job market for the last 12 to 18 months, but not surprised at all that it's not enough money. That is something as a TA leader I faced annually, monthly, sometimes weekly. And so I definitely feel the pain there. I'm really excited for the 6% who are getting a lot more money. Hopefully, I will be able to help you all today find ways to request and get more budget to be able to help you achieve all of those talent acquisition goals, which I know are often ridiculous. And there are things that are completely outside of your control that impact whether it's your ability to meet those objectives. So we'll definitely have a lot of fun conversation today, Susan.
So let's start with just that. Why is talking about a talent acquisition budget important, and why is it so frustrating to TA professionals?
So without budget, there's not a whole lot we can get done. You all know that. It's frustrating. I mean, just from my own experiences, as well as working with clients over the last 9 years that I've been on the consulting side of the house, there's several things. I distinctly remember, and you heard some of the brand names I worked for, I would start our fiscal year not having any idea what my budget was. And it would be months before those numbers would be communicated. Now, I built a reputation of spending a whole lot of money in that first quarter that no one could take back. But there are smarter ways to go about doing that. But you are often not sure what you're working with. It's a couple other things that come into play. Many of your leaders, like many of the leaders at our clients, are a little bit obsessed with cost per hire numbers, and they're always backward-looking data. We're often asked to hire more people next year than we did last year with less money, which I've never really understood the mental gymnastics people go through for that. We'll talk about metrics and things that you can be thinking about to change the discussion internally that opens up that budget discussion. And then depending on the organization that you're a part of, there's often some crazy things going on in finance. You might be charging money back to different parts of the business based on hires or some usage of your services, particularly if you're in a shared services environment. And that becomes near impossible to manage as a TA leader. So there's a lot of challenges involved with budgets. And you can often feel like you're fighting that battle on a weekly, daily basis.
I did get chills. I do remember those mental gymnastics. I did get a gold medal one year, I think. So tell us how we can start having the conversations about budget and how you can come up with plans and strategies to build the budget year over year.
So one of the most important things to do as a TA leader is sit down and figure out all of the costs associated with everything that you do. Some of these may or may not be in your actual TA budget. Sometimes you need resources from other parts of human capital teams. Sometimes it's the line organizations that are participating, but understanding what those are. And the easiest way to start that is just looking at, what are our labor and non-labor costs. Obviously your biggest cost is almost always going to be the labor for your organization, but you can start thinking about those and tracking those at least for a quarter. If you can start here, new quarter is going to start for many companies on October 1 to really fully track those, or if you have good accounting and good resources to go back for a quarter, a year would be ideal, but we don't always have that kind of time. Sometimes we've got to look at what's available. And break those down into categories like fixed cost. Labor is a fixed cost in my mind. We're not just going to add and take away staff regularly, but things like what do you pay for all the systems that you use, whether they come out of your budget in TA or IT's budget or some other budget, your HRIS team might house that. But what are all those costs associated with what it is that you need to do to deliver talent acquisition services to the organization? So you've got those fixed costs. You're thinking about facilities. We're seeing a lot of return to work and people are recommitting to being in a physical workplace. Do you get charged for costs around your team having facilities access? And then look at the variable. And these are the things that you often have a little bit more control over. Your advertising costs, which we'll talk a lot about today, events that you attend, travel and training for your team, special promotions, employee referral fees, all of those things fit in that variable. But you pretty much throw the kitchen sink in, make your list. Look, what does it typically take for us to operate for a quarter? Where is all that money coming from? And then thinking about, what do I wish I had? I know you all have a list, whether it's mental or on a spreadsheet or something in between. What are all those things and what are those costs associated with those? And we'll talk about calculating ROI, but thinking about what are everything that takes to run the organization today? Where are my holes? And what additional spend? And that could be labor. It could be tools, it could be other variable costs. So it really depends on what's going on in your market. So that's a really, really great place to start internally before you kind of start having those external conversations with the key decision makers in your organization.
And so you start with the list, and I'm dying. If you've got something that's on your wish list, put it in the chat because we all want to learn from each other here. But what about turnover and some of these other pieces? Like, how does that play into it?
This is very interesting. I just had a conversation with a client this morning about how turnover is impacting her budget and things are not predictable. If any of you were able to predict your turnover for the last 12 months, come work for me at HireClix. So you'd make a great data analyst and soothsayer what's going on. But understanding that turnover impact, because we all know and can get somewhat of our arms around what our hiring for growth might look like. However, I've yet to meet a business that's really good at forecasting that. But that's a different conversation than hiring to replace turnover. And turnover has been all over the place, probably higher for every one of you on this call than you ever imagined it would be in the last year. But that conversation I was having with the client this morning was, okay, let's back that all in there. Because if your turnover has spiked 10, 15, 20% over what you've seen historically, that is significant stress on your organization. So fully understanding that, partnering with your HR business partners, in what parts of the organization is the turnover the most problematic? Is it regional? Is it specific skill sets? This client saw a huge spike in people in hard to fill positions that were just hired in this calendar year that are already departing, that they had not accounted for at all in their plan. So factoring all of that in, what's now near the top of the wish list just to help fill that gap. So fully understanding turnover and the implications of turnover, both regrettable and non-regrettable. Because if there are roles, you still need to fill them. And sometimes people departing are okay. But often when you're seeing the spikes that you all have seen in the last year, it becomes truly challenging. So getting your arms around that and showing what that has meant, creating a chart of your open recs, how they have spiked across time. I bet if you lay that on top of your turnover numbers, you're going to see a predictable trend that you can start to manage, that as your needs go up by a certain percent, your budget's got to increase, not just labor. It's hard to hire recruiters today. It's a great job to be in right now, everybody. But your advertising costs, you're going to get into branding. We're going to talk about that as well. Nobody knows who you are, who's applying to your jobs. So there's a lot of challenges. And I saw branding as a wish list item come up in someone's chat as well. Tools like LinkedIn Premium. Recruiter seats make a big difference depending on the skills that you're after. So start showing that story of the business, what's going on in the business. When you can turn this conversation into here's what's happening in the business, suddenly the business leaders see you as a partner in solving their problem, not just someone asking for more money. You're now saying, here's what I need to do to help solve this talent gap that you're experiencing that's probably stopping the business from generating revenue, from landing new contracts, whatever those things might be, producing what you need, meeting production requirements, whatever industry you're in. Start tying those trends to your overall business objectives is really the most important thing you can do.
So when you think about starting the conversation, are there certain partners in the business you should have?
So one of the smartest things I did before I even went back to school to get my MBA, because I realized I didn't know enough about finance back in the day, was found a partner in finance so that I would just sit down with and say, okay, I need to be able to talk about my budget with my leaders. Let me walk you through the data that I have, the trends that I'm seeing. What am I missing? One of the smartest things I ever did, I should probably find Jim and buy him a really nice bottle of wine since I'm talking about him today. And he was able to help me walk through, I think he talks finance numbers with business leaders all the time. So he was really me set my slides up in the right order, think about what's going to be most important, gave me insights into what pressures they're feeling in the business today, so I could tie those to talent. Find someone like that in the organization, whether it's a finance person, a right hand to a business leader who's really good at partnering. They will be your biggest ally and advocate, and someone that you can go back with. That really made a huge difference for me, and what prompted me to think about, hey, I might need to know a little bit more about finance, and then went and got the degree, and then would sit with balance sheets with my CFO, and he was like, what are you doing? But you don't need to go that far. You don't need an MBA to be successful at this. Get that internal partner to help you think through those ideas. It really will make a difference for you.
And when you've got a good finance partner, I probably owe Kim Parks a bottle of wine too. Like everything becomes easier because they become invested in your success.
Right, right.
So how can hiring a consultant help you with building a budget and finding more money? Where is that hidden money that we know that you can find?
Yes. So this is all great and fun, but it's time consuming. And you all have positions to fill, teams to lead, random decks to develop to prove your existence in the world. All of those things, getting a consultant that can help you and come in and take a look at two really specific things. We find this every time we partner with folks here at HireClix from the consulting standpoint, your process and your tools and systems. So one of the interesting things, going through a full process mapping, process optimization exercise will often uncover redundant steps in your process or things that you're using today that might not be helping your overall process, whether it's moving people through the system faster or making better hiring decisions. One we uncovered last year with a client was an assessment that they had candidates taking early on in the process. When we did the analysis, we were showing that that assessment was actually not correlated to success through the interview process or the job. Yet they were slowing down their process by sending people to the assessment. I think it took 15 to 20 minutes to take, but there was a huge cost associated. They got charged $20, $30 every time somebody took that assessment. And when you're hiring at volume, if you take that step out, guess what I just found for you? Thousands and thousands of dollars that you can repurpose to things that are going to align more with your strategy, whether it's branding or recruitment marketing or a different tool. So getting an outside third party to kind of walk through that, do that analysis, help you find those things. There could just be time savings that would shorten your time to fill, which would give you justification for more spend. But there's a lot of things in the process that can be found that way, that so often you've just always done the assessment. Did anybody ever stop and look and say, is this really helping us? We found out the answer was no. And they will be taking it out of the process and repurposing the money. So that's one thing consultants can help you with. And then your systems and tools are another. I did a survey, it was probably 5 years ago, where the average recruiter had 9 to 11 system logins in order to do their job, whether it was their ATS, their CRM, video interview tool, LinkedIn Recruiter, some sourcing tool. The list was wildly long. I promise you, none of you are using all the functionality of all the tools that you own. It's who has the time to figure all of this out? And often you're not even aware that your ATS, for example, might be able to do some things that you think you have to go buy another tool for. So doing an audit of all of those tools available to you currently, who's using them? What value are they getting out of them? I know recruiters well. I know they love to have all the sourcing tools possible. But if we can find the 2 or 3 that are having the biggest impact and reduce the spend on others, you can move that money into different areas. Or maybe you don't need a specific interview scheduling tool because your ATS can handle it. So there might be ways to consolidate, or they've released new functionality that you're not aware of. So consultants can help you find those pockets of process and tools that will free up existing budget. You don't even have to go ask for more. You can repurpose what's in your existing budget.
I love the idea, like process optimization. We get so close to it, right? Like, and then a new leader comes in and they make a couple tweaks, and this person makes a couple tweaks. And some people are like, we've always done it that way. And just having an outside view at what you're doing and start asking the right questions can be a total change. Tell me about a testing budget.
I know you are passionate about testing budgets as well, Susan. I think this is a really smart thing to think about doing in your budget every year. Some sum of money where you can try out a new marketing tactic, a new tool, a new approach to something, a new branding campaign, something that allows you to test and try without buying fully, committing to a whole annual spend or beyond that. We typically recommend looking for 10 to 15% of your overall budget. But Susan, I know you've got some good stories of successes you had with the testing budget.
We had, I think for 3 or 4 years, a test and react budget. That's what we called it, test and react. Because finance had a really hard time understanding that I want this money and I can't tell you what I'm going to do with it. That just sends finance over the edge. So what we did is we said, we are going to go to these vendors and we're going to push hard to get a really good deal. And we're going to try it before we sign a year contract or a 2-year contract. And then we're going to select for the next year, based off of these tests, what we're going to add into the budget and what we're going to take out of the budget. And for us, it was a game changer in bringing the company technology up to date and bringing on some really bells and whistle tools that we wanted, but finance kept saying, you don't have any more money. But then when we could prove that ROI in a short amount of time, all of a sudden the test and react budget was a big hero win and other departments wanted it. So I'm really passionate about that. So Kara, tell us this. What is recruitment marketing?
Yeah. So recruitment marketing at the end of the day is no different than consumer marketing. The people you're trying to get to apply for the job are consumers, just like the folks that people are trying to get to buy things. We have historically somehow thought these are very different concepts, but they're the same human beings. And consumer marketing tends to be a little bit further ahead, sometimes 5 to 10 years ahead of what we've done in recruitment marketing. And we're closing that gap. We're really focused on it here at HireClix, but we're really closing that gap. So when you think about this from a consumer perspective, one of the things I think it's really important for TA leaders to understand and to start communicating internally is this is no different than trying to get someone to buy a pair of Nikes. The data shows 7 to 11 impressions or touches are needed before someone clicks buy now or walks into a store and buys this pair of Air Jordans. 7 to 11 touches. Again, these are the same human beings that we want to apply to jobs. People don't just say, oh, there's a random job, I'm going to apply to that. They've never heard of the company. They might not know the industry. They don't know anything about you. Maybe they're not looking for a job right now. Just like I might not always be looking for a new pair of running shoes, but Nike's always showing them to me. So when it's time to find a new pair of running shoes, I might be thinking about that brand or others that I've had in front. That is required, and that's your employer branding. That's getting your message, increasing awareness. I always encourage people to think about this as awareness. You wouldn't buy a pair of running shoes you weren't aware of, that you've never heard of before. You would need information. Maybe you would go into a store and have a lengthy conversation. That's kind of like a career fair. You might convince someone at a career fair. But from a digital, online, and even out-of-home marketing, you have to think about this from that awareness standpoint, those 7 to 11 touches. It is not reasonable to expect people to take an action and apply for a job when they have absolutely no information about who you are, what you do. And we're not the best in TA about writing job ads. So when we start off with just, here's your responsibilities, here's your qualifications, this is all that you get to do, it becomes problematic. So you've done nothing to raise their awareness, get them to engage with you and think about you as an employer before they click apply. So I think that's one of the most important things when you think about and talk about recruitment marketing. It's not just my job's on Indeed and I sponsored it. It's what have I done to make people aware of the fact that we even have opportunities here and things that could be done that would be of interest to those individuals. So I think that that's really an important part. And that's something that you all need to include as you're talking and telling your story internally about why you need recruitment marketing and why you need budget for recruitment marketing. So you have to make sure that you have a portion of your budget aligned towards that awareness building, as well as that direct response, we would call it here in recruitment marketing land, where here's an ad for a job that's open today, click this and come to my ATS and apply. So that's kind of a real important baseline piece of information about recruitment marketing that we somehow miss in talent acquisition that's important to understand.
I think that's so important, right? Because we've got to be able to explain that, because if they're sitting in the ivory tower, they're like, we're a great place. Why do they not want to come work here? And all of those other pieces, they're like, don't you just post a job and they apply? There's a little disconnect there sometimes. So how do you get the best bang for your buck with recruitment marketing?
So before we even go there, I want to kind of talk about one other important thing around when you get to that direct response and you are advertising those jobs, that you're advertising jobs in a market. So the market dynamics are changing all the time. The skills you're looking for today in a specific market may or may not be the same skills that other employers are looking for in that exact same market. Next week, that could change. You don't know what's happening with other employers. You don't know who's coming into that marketplace that will change things drastically. I live in the DC metropolitan area, which is overrun by government contractors. A lot of technology here, a lot of great stuff going on, but it's government contractors. When Amazon Web Services moved their headquarters here, the market changed overnight. They were a brand name that everybody knew. They were sexy and cool. They weren't a government contractor. They were looking for the exact same skills all the government contractors were, but it came with the commercial and an Amazon. The market changed overnight. The budget to find those people and attract them had to go up. Now you were branding against Amazon. You were, as well as Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing. And then if you were in that mid-tier, you had a big challenge. You and your company cannot control who else is looking for the same talent in the same markets as you. And now that many of you have gone to all virtual jobs, your market is the US. And people have a whole lot of choices. So those things change. And in this kind of pay for performance world, you sponsor jobs on Indeed, you pay for clicks, you use a variety of programmatic where you might pay for applicants. You don't know what other people are bidding either. So that market changes. So just because a $25 cost per applicant was your number last week does not mean it's going to get you the same applicants this week, because the market dynamics have changed. And you've got to educate that inside your organization. And that's where you really have to have a good partner to help you understand that. So that's important. And then to get your bang for the buck, you have to be clear. This is where you own the story. We are not good in talent acquisition at telling our own story. We are great at getting stuff done, delivering when no one thinks we can. We do more with less all the time, and then we never tell our own story. We're terrible at that. We can tell the story of why it's great to work here externally, why we're great salespeople there, why we can't turn that around. Use those same skills. You have to make it very clear. Portions of your budget are earmarked towards awareness or branding. Portions are earmarked toward that direct response. You have to make sure that internally they understand you've got to build that baseline data. If you just start actively doing branding advertising tomorrow, I don't know what the answer is. How many impressions should you get? How should that translate to your career site? I don't know yet. So you're going to need a whole quarter of learning and trying things and measuring what's happening and identifying what's working best and what's not, because those market dynamics are changing. Your needs may very well be changing. So you have to then think, as you have your awareness budget, you have your direct response budget, what are those clear metrics for each of those areas? They are different. Direct response, we want to know who clicked on the job, who applied to the job, who started applying to the job. On awareness, you want to make sure you're clear on how many, you're looking at things like impressions and clicks and views, and if it's social media, shares and comments. So being very clear about how you are going to measure things, taking that quarter to create your baseline, so then you are able to have success, know what's working, know what your tolerance level is, and understand the market will be really, really important. One of my favorite examples to help executives understand when we get to these things between branding and direct response is these big brands that sponsor stadiums. So you think Levi's, they sponsor the San Francisco 49ers stadium in Santa Clara, California. It's Levi's Stadium. There are no executives at Levi's that say, how many pairs of jeans did we sell because our name's on the stadium? That is not the metric they're looking at. The ad they put on ESPN for buying a pair of jeans, they want to know how many pair of jeans they sold. But the stadium is how many impressions did we get? How many people were exposed, whether it was in person on TV? They're really getting that picture. How many other events happened beyond the 49ers playing there? Those are the types of things that you're looking at. So when you're talking about this stuff to executives, use my Levi's Stadium example. And they're measuring everything for an online ad they do for jeans. How many actual pairs of jeans did it sell? That's just like a job ad, a direct response. How many applicants did I get from Indeed? That's a valid question. How many people did I get to apply to a job because we put a banner ad on a social media or a association organization just to share information, or we smartly used video for our employees to tell their story about why they work there? That's building brand awareness. So if you've got those videos out there on your career site, how many people did we watch them? How much longer did they stay on our career site because there was video? I promise you, if you're using video and tracking these things, the number is astronomical. But those are the kinds of things. You tell them what the measurements are. I had a COO once come in my office, early days of social media recruiting, say, Kara, how many hires did we get from this tweet? And that was when I was like, oh, my battle is very uphill. So I had to start telling the story. That's where you start to get the most bang for your buck, when you own the story and you give them the metrics that are most important.
I bet you have just changed a lot of conversations for people, right? Because talking about awareness and those 7 to 11 touches is something that takes a little bit of constitution and, stick-to-itiveness to help them get to that past that awareness to that apply.
Yeah, it's really important. And the long game is indeed needed in recruitment marketing, more so today than a year and a half ago. But going forward, how people look for and consider employment opportunities has changed drastically in the last 2 years. You have to tell your story. You have to build your brand. You have to have a presence, because just one job ad in the sea of millions of job ads is not going to get you the results that you need to be successful.
So I'm going to put another poll up here, and then I'm going to ask you a question while they're doing the poll. The poll is, how do you measure the ROI of your recruiting marketing efforts? But one of my favorite things that HireClix does is personas. Will you give us the 30-second overview of what a persona is?
Yes, marketing personas for recruiting are so wildly important. And what we do when we build personas is we identify what are those key skill sets that you're after. Who are they? Who drives your business? And we will do external and internal research, surveys, and focus groups. We'll dig up additional data to build you out a full persona of that individual. And we give them a name and a backstory and what's important to them in a career and where they're going, what they're looking for in their next move, and also who they are outside of work, because you're going to have much more luck connecting with people if you understand who they are. So we get to a whole person. It gives you someone to talk to when you're thinking about putting ads together, social media strategies. What does that persona? We did one for a mining company. His name was Miner Mike. What does Miner Mike, what is he interested in? What else is he considering? This particular mining company competed with the oil industry that was in their backyard. So we bring forward what's important to Miner Mike. Why would he consider this company versus going to a different industry? And what were those distinctions? We also add in HireClix, we call them messages that matter. What is it that Miner Mike needs to hear in those 7 to 11 touches to put you at the top of his list when he's looking for a job? They're some of the most fun things we do here at HireClix. I love when we get persona projects.
Right, because if you're just talking and you're not saying the right things, that touch doesn't even mean anything.
Exactly. And the different types of people you're looking for at your company want and are interested in different things that you offer. What part of your EVP is most important to mine or Mike versus someone working in the corporate office? Obviously, something very different. Same company, same values, different messages.
Okay, I hope that makes sense because that's a fun thing to think about. So Ryan, results, how do you measure ROI? Let's see what we've got here. Okay, 33%, we auto track every applicant from their apply to hire rejected. 33%, we receive data from our vendors on the views and clicks, I think. 7%, we ask candidates where they heard about the job, and 27%, we don't measure it. So what do you think, Kara?
That's pretty much a 30% mix there, which is fascinating. It's actually a little heartening to me. The 2 years ago, we don't measure it, number would have been higher. So we're making progress there. The tracking it all the way through your ATS warms my heart. It's kind of one of our bread and butter items here at HireClix is to be able to give you full analytics of your sources. I'm glad to see so few of you are relying on candidates to tell you where they came from because they don't know. They pick whatever's at the top of the list. So don't trust them. You want to get to that stage where you can auto track everything. Most applicant tracking systems have that capability, but typically if you work with a recruitment marketing agency like a HireClix, we can help you fully auto track and understand at every step of your process, not just who your hires were, but where did the people that were invited for interviews come from? So, we call those quality sources. What are your most quality sources? So you know where to optimize your recruitment marketing budget. Indeed versus LinkedIn versus a niche job board versus your social media versus your own employee referral programs, which are often pretty good quality sources. But being able to track that is where you all want to head towards. Always happy to chat with people about where you are today and how you can get to that ultimate space. But I was excited to see at least a third of you with that full tracking. That's encouraging.
It was higher than I thought it was going to be. I'm going to admit that. And that tracking piece is so important, right? Because they tell you they saw it on LinkedIn, but they probably saw it here and here and here first, right? Those touches, and then they went to search for it, and that's where it popped up first. So that tracking is really important. So final question before we take questions. Tell me, what can your budget get you today in this really competitive landscape?
Oh, that's a load of questions.
Okay, I know it's really broad.
If you are smart about it and you understand what the drivers are in the business, so going back to understanding turnover and where our greatest needs are and what your company's growth plans are, where are those, what skill sets, locations, whatever it might be, are most important to the growth of the company, to at least get started there with your limited budget, I encourage you to not try to spread it out across all of the world. Find those biggest pain points, concentrate as big of your budget possible there while building, our CEO Neil would call it air cover from a brand perspective, making sure your message is out there to the wider audience, but concentrating those direct response dollars to the areas where you can have the biggest impact. That will help you build your business case. You'll be able to show the return on investment. If we doubled our budget for engineers in California, and here's what we saw as a result, that builds your case for, okay, what's the next most important area? Oh, we need finance people in Detroit. Let's double the budget there. So now you're showing your results, using that to show the return, get you more money. So being able to do that, so concentrate, because if you try to spread it out in today's environment, there literally is not enough budget for anybody to easily attract all the candidates that they need. So you have to be targeted, you have to be strategic about where you're spending it. So do those small, where's that piece you can have the biggest impact? Spend the money there, show the results, get more money.
That makes sense, right? Because if you're spreading it out, you're getting nothing. But if you could build a business case, get someone excited about what you did, you could say, I'd love to replicate that for you. Yes. Where in the business should we replicate it next? Open up the wallet. Let's go.
One of my favorite things to do when I worked for a company that was internally competitive, each of the business units wanted to outdo each other. I'd find one business unit, be like, let's try something. Give me this little bit of money. Oh, look at these results. Look how great Susan's business is doing. Let me go tell that to Laura. And then Laura's like, oh, I don't want Susan to beat me. I'll give you money too. Can we do that for me? Like, I played them against each other pretty regularly. So you make it a little bit of an internal competition. This is what I've done for engineering. Here's what I could do for sales. If I just had more money, you can have the same results when you have the data that shows it. So work those internal politics as well. Use them to your advantage for sure.
So what do you think are 3 things that hinder people from really digging into their budget and their systems and getting a deeper understanding?
We hit on one of them, is that auto tracking of where your candidates are coming from. So for a third of you, you're there. The other 2/3 of you, don't just rely on the vendor data. We deal with a lot of recruitment marketing vendors. Their data's all over the place, from where they are, but you want to see who comes in, who actually applies for your jobs, because to be honest, your own application process has a big impact on that. If it takes me 20 minutes to apply, you're going to lose a lot of people, which has nothing to do with whether Indeed sent you the right folks or not. So, being able to see it all the way through will make a big impact, making sure you fully understand that. Having those metrics in place and telling your story. I just saw someone had mentioned their own VP tells you to own your own story. Tell that story. You dictate what the metrics are. How do we know if this branding effort is successful? We're looking for impressions and views and clicks or shares on social, whatever that might be. You tell them. If you're working with a recruitment marketing agency, they can give you some benchmarks to be able to benchmark against for similar size companies, similar industries, similar locations. So you tell the story. That hinders us so much. We let the business tell us what success is. We know this way better than we do. I always used to joke with engineers. I don't come into your engineering meeting and tell you how to design an aircraft in my Boeing days. Don't come into my meeting and tell me how to attract people to this job. That's where my expertise is. You have to own that story, which is really important. And then being comfortable with that quarter of trying things out and seeing what's working. And you're not going to double your budget tomorrow and see 100 new applicants overnight. It doesn't happen like that. Understanding that the market's going to change and things are going to move. Those hinder. We tend to pull the rug out way too quickly with those test budgets, even like, let's let it run. Let's see what's happening here. You have to have a little bit of patience so you can see what's going to work and what's not. So those are the 3 things that I would say really, really focused.
I always say, this is not a job for somebody that's got a weak stomach, right? You have got to put in the time and the energy and be able to hold your executives at bay while you say, we don't have all the data yet. We are working on it. You need to give us some time, right? It's not going to come overnight. So we are going to take some questions now. I saw one that says, are you able to share some benchmarks that are relevant for recruitment right now?
Do you have a little bit more of an area of benchmarks that you're looking for? Because that one's a little general, but while we might be thinking about those, looking at, you're going to see on recruitment marketing your cost per click if you're on those direct ads wherever you are looking at them. What we've seen at HireClix, if you compare that cost per click today to a year and a half ago, it is more than double. So it might have been $25 for an IT person a year ago, and I'm pulling this out of the air. I don't know the data by skill set specifically, but that's going to be over 50 today. So rather than looking for a number, you want to look for trends across time that are related to the market and understanding your market dynamics. Who else is recruiting in that same area for those similar skill sets? What's happening? You're paying attention to economists from a number of areas. Most of the vendors in our space have economists on staff. Follow them on places like LinkedIn. You'll get a lot of good information, but looking for that trend across time that would be really valuable to understand what's happening, and you can tell that market story. Other things to look at, what we typically see when we build social media awareness and engagement strategies for people, for companies, if you're going that route, is that you're looking for across about a quarter, your awareness and engagement plans have been successful if you are growing your followers, for example, your LinkedIn followers, your Instagram, your Facebook, wherever they might be. If you're growing at least 10% month over month, wanting that is good. We'd love for that to be 20 or more, but it also depends on how much effort and time and what your plan is. But showing that consistent growth, particularly if you have a channel that's career specific versus being wrapped up in a consumer brand and trying to tell career stories, it can be a little harder. But if you have a career specific channel, looking for that growth about 10%, that's a good benchmark. And we see that kind of across a variety of different industries and types of companies, B2B versus B2C as well.
So Megan asked, what is the most innovative version of recruiting you've seen recently that brings an unknown business into the known?
Honestly, it's video.
Mm-hmm.
Companies that are embracing video, and not just and definitely not the produced, here's the expert, like it took us $100,000 to develop this. Employee generated video. Empower your employees to tell their story. Give them prompts, give them direction, make sure that's why personas are helpful. We need to know what messages matter to Minor Mike, so I know what things to ask the other minors to talk about. But that authentic message from your employees about what matters the most is so much more valuable. There's data out there, and I'm sure our JobPixel friends have it, about the increase in shares and engagement that type of video, authentic employee video gets versus a produced, your CEO sitting in his or her office, just talking about the company. Going that route, that allows you, people are looking for opportunities to connect and relate. Give them those. I've really seen companies start to gain brand recognition. And let me tell you, it's really inexpensive. If you get employees to sit at their laptop or on their phone and record the video for you, there's not editing, all of those things. And there's partners like JobPixel that make this. So I just shot one for our own company. We're using JobPixel at HireClix to tell our own employee stories. And I just shot one on Friday. It was like the easiest thing I've ever done. So your average employee, and it was easy to engage and super simple. So think about video. That's a great way to get that message out there and super easy.
I agree, right? And right or wrong, and I'm one of those, right? Like, we're not reading as much as we used to, right? Like you get half the email, you get half of this because we're moving so fast. But if there's a video I can watch, then I'm engaged. I'm flipping to the next one because somebody said something interesting and going forward. We've got a question here that says, when trying a new strategy to attract new leads, how long do you give yourself to see if it's successful as the market is always shifting?
That is a great question, Kathy. I see that in there. I'd like to say, if you can hold on for a quarter, do your best to do that. It's a little bit dependent on how shifting your market is. If you're watching it and you're seeing new entrants into the space or brand names that you've never competed against before, you might need a little bit more time. If it's a little bit more static, it's the same competitors that you typically are about, your cost per click, your cost per applicant aren't wildly moving across the way, you might be able to do 4 to 6 weeks. But if you can convince leadership to give you a quarter, take the whole quarter, because a lot of things can happen in that time frame.
Susan, I'm going to jump in because I have a question over here. You may have not seen that came in.
Perfect.
There is a question around how often do you recommend teams reevaluate their tech stack?
Ooh, that is a great question, whoever asked that one. At a minimum annually. I wouldn't do it much more often than that, because if you just launch something this year, it really takes you 9 to 12 months to really get its full. But if you're looking at it every year, because I don't know if you all see the investment that goes into HR technology, and particularly in TA, it's astronomical, billions and billions of dollars now every quarter. So there's always new stuff coming out, which can give you whiplash. If you take a pause once a year to say, okay, here's what's in our stack, what else is out there in the marketplace, where are those gaps we've been tracking? Do we really need AI in our process? Do we need a chatbot? Do we need those types of things? Now let's see what's in the market, because the prices are also changing drastically, as well as those things going on. So I would say put a benchmark in about once a year. I recommend doing it about a quarter before your budget request is due, so that you have time to think through what do we need to add. You could do some demos, get some rough costs, so you know what to ask for. So if you're on a fiscal year, I always had to do my budget in August and September for next January. So do it in like late spring, do it like May, and take a look. So kind of back it up from that standpoint, because you don't want to be asked for your budget and not have the new tech you want to potentially consider in there. So I would do it, about 3 months before you have to submit your budget request.
When I was a TA leader, I always had a end of year call. It wasn't an end of year, really. It was like mid-year end, but we called it the end of year call that said, as I'm headed into the next year, and this is with my competitors, right? What are you going to start, stop, continue from a tech standpoint? So we talk about the one piece of tech that we had found that we were not ever leaving because we love them so much. What were we going to stop using? Why were we going to stop using it? We all signed this like little NDA that we couldn't talk about it outside of the group. And it was more inferred NDA, but like, it was like, we won't talk about vendors specifically from a name standpoint, but we will talk about the vendor that we're going to use. And then what are we curious about? And is anybody in that group using it? And so it gave us a good point of, starting to get our budgets in place.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Susan, I have one more that just came in over here, which is, I guess for Kara as well, is if a company is interested in engaging with a consultant, they've never done it before, what do you recommend that they prepare internally before they even make that outreach? And then how do they get started?
That is a really good question. The internal prepare part, what are the goals you're trying to achieve? And they can be relatively generic or kind of overarching. We want to, have a greater brand recognition in these skill categories. We want to decrease our time to hire. I'll do a whole other presentation on why I hate time to hire, but it is one people love. What are those goals? Get agreement internally, and please, please, please make sure the decision makers are a part of those discussions. Anyone who can veto a project at the 11th hour, you need to have them in your early conversations, because they will veto the project at the 11th hour. And we've been a part of a lot of those where we've had to scrap because the person that ultimately had to approve was never involved in, understanding what the problem was or what you were trying to do. So understand who those key decision makers are, whose budget it is, who is it. If it's your CHRO, can zip in at the last minute, get her involved early on to at least set those goals and understand your criteria for selecting someone and what you would be looking to with the project. So you don't have to get to minutia, because as consultants, we'll help you say, let me break this branding thing down. We'll give you hey, here's where you stand today. This is what we think is reasonable for brand recognition 6 months from now. How do we get you there? Those internal conversations around who is the decision maker, who can veto things, get them involved, include them in the selecting of a consultant. And then, from my perspective, as transparent as you can be about what really is going on. My job as your consultant is to make you look good. I think it's probably one of the first things I ever said to Susan when we first started working together was, it's our job to make a client look good. So the more I know about your internal challenges, who the key players are, what the politics are, the more I can help you look good. I don't care if they ever know I did it. It's all going to be you, but being transparent from the beginning, you're going to find that right partner who really will understand the situation that you're in. So know what your goals are, get the key decision makers, the veto power people involved early, and then be as transparent as possible about what your internal hurdles are. And then we can really help you.
I think that's such a good point. One of my big goofs in my career was I chunk of change and marketing came in and axed the project because they didn't love it. So don't forget about your marketing friends because they can veto sometimes.
Very good.
And I love that, like, HireClix's job is to, your consultant's job is to make you look good. Like you tell them what's going on. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the reasons, because I'm a former HireClix client, my career grew and kept going because they made me look good for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. We've got one more question here and then I'm going to end. So we've got about 60 seconds. If you're part of, this is such a good question. If you're part of a large organization and you have no control over funding, how would you recommend learning about budget without overstepping? There's those politics, especially for that line item for let's try this new avenue, tech, whatever.
Oh yeah, this is a fun one. And I've been a part of some really large organizations. So I understand the challenge there. I think it's all in general in your approach and understanding the politics. So you getting that sense of, hey, walk me through, how do we decide? How was this? Like, ask people what's important to you when you're deciding how we spend money. People love to talk about themselves and why they make decisions the way they do. So, if I've worked in an organization where I had to get my budget from all the different business units, so I had to make the rounds and convince everyone and have those conversations. The thing I learned there as well, do those as one-on-one conversations, not with like the key decision makers all at once, because whoever's the loudest voice in that room will be the one everyone else will kind of agree with. But if you talk to them each individually and then get them all together and they're like, hey, Omar, remember when you told me this? And Susan, you told me this. And so that's where I came up with this idea because of what you guys told me. So now they are invested in that conversation. But have those individual conversations, turn it around to help me understand, make it about the business. As soon as they understand that you are aligned with making the business successful, they're much more willing to give you the story about what's going on. And then when you find, maybe you talk to 4 people, 2 of them you feel connect with, those are the ones you go to with, let's try this new thing. What do you think about $20,000 for this recruitment marketing campaign? It's going to be a test, but here's the potential upside. We could get you 100% more candidates given what I'm seeing in the market. It might be less than that, but it's going to be somewhere between there. So you'll get them to buy in, tie it to what their biggest needs are.
Great. So Kara, this has been a joy. I think you are one of the smartest people in TA. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your secrets with us. She's put together this beautiful deck that we're going to follow up and send to everybody who attended today. So if there's something you missed, there are some good nuggets on there. And, there's always a presentation you plan to give and the one you give and the one that actually happens. So we're going to send you some stuff in case we missed anything. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank JobPixel for hosting us. They are incredible partners. And the last partner that I signed up with before I left my corporate job. If you enjoyed today's event, you can catch me next week. I get to host next week again, as I'll be returning to moderate a discussion between the co-founders of Great People Applicant Tracking System, a word that either gets you excited or doesn't get you excited. So we get to talk to Diane Smith and Jen Kettles on improving candidate engagement and the importance of having a great candidate experience. And we're really excited to be able to spend time with them. You'll love the 2 of them. You can sign up for the rest of the TA Summer Series events by going to www.jobpixel.com/webinars. And Ryan's going to put that in the chat. We appreciate your time today. We appreciate your questions, and we hope to see you next week.